infinite complacence, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space.
On this episode of Into the Fray, John Killian of the Ex V Planis podcast returns, and he was on with me recently for episode 473. I titled that The Uinta Basin, where he discussed very interesting interactions that occurred while camping right next to Skinwalker Ranch. And while he was on, he of course mentioned he's had other paranormal experiences, and he's back to share some of those. John, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. It was a blast to hang out last time, and I'm looking forward to this one.
So right out of the gate, we were emailing after the show was done, and you told me that the rusty orb that you spoke about on 473 came back. Let's talk about that straight out.
Yeah. All right. So the same night that the night after you and I had our initial discussion where we talked about Uinta Basin, I went out to movies in the park. They were doing like Halloween themed movies out in the park here in Raleigh. And I went out with a friend of mine who is also a UFO experiencer. You know, we pretty much ignored the movie and just stared at the sky all night and just started talking about the weird phenomena that we've seen. And sure enough, like as we're talking about it, we start to see some weird things up in the sky. After a few seconds, I start to catch something on the periphery of my vision. And as soon as I saw this thing bounce around, I'm like, son of a, it's back. So if you remember the way that I described the rusty orb last time, it's like this thing knew when it was being watched and it would immediately dart out of your field of vision. It makes it impossible to capture it on camera. This thing seems to anticipate where you're going to look and knows how to just bounce out of sight super fast. And it's certainly one of those things like maybe my eyes are just messing with me. But then the person next to me is like, did you see that? I'm like, cool. All right, it's back. But yeah, this thing just bounced around overhead for about 15, 20 minutes and then eventually just kind of wandered off. And I've seen it like once or twice since then. But this is the high strangeness aspect of all this stuff, right? You start talking about it and it'll manifest itself in some way, shape, or form. So it's a little creepy, but also a little comedic to me that you and I had such troubles connecting on the first episode through technical issues, like somebody didn't want us to talk about this. And then later that night, boom, there's the orb again.
It's like it was taking credit for it, right? I'm like, thanks a lot, Rusty Orb. We see you. So you say also that you've seen it once or twice even since then. What's the closest you think you've ever come to the Rusty Orb?
It always keeps a distance. It's never come close to me in any way, shape, or form. I mean, like hundreds of feet up in the air at the very least. It's not trying to. I get the sense that it's not trying to let itself be known, which is why as soon as I start to look for it, it starts to bounce and dart around. It never lets me get that close. And the second that my fingers reach for any piece of technology to try to capture this thing, before I even touch the equipment, poof, it's gone.
That's amazing. We've heard that before. Just the thought of you going for such a thing, it knows that somehow.
It is unrelentlessly infuriating, Shannon.
Yeah, because that's what everybody says. Well, why didn't you take a picture of it? Well, I tried, but the second I thought to, it said, see ya.
Yeah, this is why. And to any of the skeptics out there who raise an eyebrow, I totally get you. I really, really do. But once you experience these things firsthand, you know, again, everything goes back to consciousness for me, and they're tuned into ours in some way, shape, or form. So the phenomenon will never let itself get captured or you know, it'll never give evidence unless it wants to.
And refresh everyone's memory. How large would you say this orb is?
If I had to estimate, I would probably say, God, I mean, and this is just spitballing here because, like I said, the thing stayed really, really far away. I would say probably about 6 to 8 feet, you know?
And again, just to reiterate, my favorite part of the orb is the fact that it's rusty, because usually people describe these shiny, metallic, or it's made of light or whatever, and you come out with rusty, and I'm like, that's very unique.
Yeah, yeah. And don't get me wrong, I've seen orange balls of light. I've had all sorts of anomalous light encounters, but yeah, this was one of the very few times in my life that I've actually seen what could be described as a solid craft. And it was rusty, orangish and red. I mean, it really did look rusted. And it had these weird seams on it, somewhat like a basketball, but not symmetrical. It was just kind of all over the place. I'll try to sketch that one out and send it to you before you put this up, and maybe I can help illustrate it a little bit more, quite literally.
That would be really cool, because I know that people appreciated seeing the clip art phenomena
Oh,
that you sent along, a rendition of that.
yeah, and speaking of which, I want to say thank you very much for adding that, and also thank you to all of your listeners who actually reached out to me. I did have a few people reach out and ask some questions about that image, and offer some interesting paths to look down. So I don't know. I'll come back to that somewhere down the line for sure. But
Oh,
yeah, thank you all for reaching out.
nice. I love to hear that. That's just nice to know people are interactive. I absolutely appreciate that, and I know that you do too. So this that's crazy. So this thing also has seams on it, but they're not really straight. I will enjoy seeing your rendition of that now as well. So the movements that it makes once you're thinking, "Hey, I'm gonna get you on camera," and it's like, "No, you're not." The
Hmm.
movements are like what? Like they're absolutely not conventional. I mean, we're talking like 90-degree crazy turns, or what is it doing?
I think the best way to describe it actually comes from the mouth of Commander David Fravor from the USS Nimitz event. You know, with the infamous Tic Tac UFO that we keep hearing about. When he described when he first saw the Tic Tac, it was actually right above the surface of the water, which was being roiled in some way, shape, or form, like something was underneath the surface. And the Tic Tac was, he described it as bouncing around like a ping pong ball in an enclosed case. And that's the best way I can describe it. Like ping pong ball. Boom, 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 stop. Boom, 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 stop. It never made every once in a while it would do like slow gliding movements. But as soon as I tried to lock eyes with it, that's when it starts going ping pong. And it's just like poof, 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 poof. Yeah.
So this other person that was with you, is this one of the researchers that was camping out in Utah with you?
No, no, no. This is actually somebody who is probably going to end up being a new member of the team, but she's a lifelong UFO experiencer, and we were just hanging out and talking about this stuff, and then there it is.
Now, since she's an experiencer, that probably all right. Here, let me just ask straight out: is that rusty orb strange to her, like it was for me and some other folks, or is she like, oh no, I've actually seen something similar to that?
Her her response was a little like a little subdued from what you would expect when somebody sees something like that, but she's seen so many things herself. It's just like, okay, yeah, that's weird. She did say that she had never seen anything like that in particular herself. Most of hers were light anomalies, and I think there was one craft that she saw. But don't quote me on that. I'll have to get more data from her on it. Um, but yeah, it's a, if you get enough experiencers into one spot, I honestly do think that you can trigger something. Because our minds are like wicks for this stuff. So if you get the right people lined up, something will happen. You know.
That is too cool, and I'm sure that you were relieved to have someone else there just to see the damn thing, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like anytime that I experience like anomalous phenomena of any sort when I'm alone, I have to sit there and constantly second guess myself, and like I have to be my own skeptic brain at the same time as being an experiencer. So when I'm out there with someone and something bizarre happens and there's another witness, it definitely calms my nerves, because this stuff is so weird that even though that I've seen it most of my life, anytime that it happens, I always have that moment of, am I going insane? like it never fails. Even though by this point I know all this stuff is real, but it's still just it never gets any easier to process, you know.
All right, so next up, we're going to speak about Waverly Hills. And, usually that's essentially an automatic, oh, yeah, I don't know, let's just guess 80% of the people listening probably know where, and what that's all about. But for those that don't, can you just give a little bit of history on Waverly Hills and what happened to you there?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so Waverly Hills was built in the early 1900s as don't quote me on this. It's 1920s or 30s is when the first part of it was built. Again, I don't have my notes in front of me, so please nobody crucify me for that. It was built as a tuberculosis clinic, and eventually it turned into a massive tuberculosis institution because that was the rampant health problem during the times until the advent of antibiotics in the 60s. Over the course of decades, this place became the home to anybody in the area who suffered greatly from tuberculosis. And basically, the idea was it was elevated up enough, the cool air could come through, and the building was built in a manner to allow airflow to come in and make the lives of the patients a little bit easier because it's a respiratory issue that was truly horrific for the time. Um, Now, over the course of decades, in the decades that it was known as Waverly, I want to say about 60,000 or 40,000 people died there. Um, After antibiotics came along, it got shut down because everybody was able to kind of recover, and eventually it just wasn't needed. And then it got repurposed as the Woodhaven Home for Geriatrics, and that's where the history gets really dark. And this is what a lot of people don't really pay attention to is during the time that it was Waverly, yeah, tens of thousands of people died there, but the feeling of it during that time was one of genuine care. And they had their own little community, their own little city there. The patients really cared for each other just as much as the doctors did, and there was a lot of good was done in spite of some of the barbaric methods that they would use to treat these because they didn't know what they were messing with at the time. So splitting somebody's rib cage open and then shining UV lights onto their lungs seems to like be a good idea for the time, I guess. That happened.
Mm.
But it's when it became Woodhaven Home for Geriatrics that things got really, really dark because it essentially became a dumping ground for anyone with mental illness or undesirables of any kind. Um, and staff abused patients, patients abused patients. It got really, really nasty in there. And that's where I think a lot of the dark side of Waverly it comes from. It's not coming from the time of tuberculosis. It's during that period where you had a considerable amount of um, just real evil human trauma going on. Regarding our visit there, every time I go to one of these places, and I do know, like Waverly is like, old hat to a lot of people. Paranormal investigators are all like, yeah, 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 Waverly, Waverly. And at this point, it has kind of become a gimmick. But the thing is, that place is consistent. Like it pays off like a slot machine. I don't care if you're not an experiencer or if you don't even believe in this stuff. If you go there, you're going to have something weird happen to you that you're not going to be able to explain. But when I went there for one specific person, or one specific reason. And that reason was to see the infamous Waverly Hills Creeper. Have you ever heard about this thing?
Uh, I'm sure that I have, but it's actually been a while since I've heard a decent Waverly Hills story.
All right, well, you're about to get a doozy here. Uh, First, let me backtrack for a second. Let's explain the creeper, and then I'm going to explain how we got to the creeper. So the creeper is described as a humanoid figure that tends to crouch in the corners, crawl on the walls or the ceiling, and tends to follow certain people. This has been documented by several paranormal investigators over the years. There's some really good stories out of there. And I was fascinated by this. So I had that in my mind. It's like, man, I want to meet this thing. Seriously. Um, Shannon, you know that that old quote of like, be careful of what you wish for because you might just get it.
Oh, yeah.
This is that. So I got my encounter with the creeper, but before it got to that, there was kind of a build up, and this is actually gonna. All right, this is a long-winded story, but it's actually going to go into some pretty personal spaces that I don't really talk about all that much. But we're going to do this. We started an Estes session in the morgue, which if anybody out there listening, I'm sure you know what the Estes method is. But if you don't, basically it's a form of instrumental transcommunication. You put on noise canceling headphones and listen to sweep radio that's burning through all of the stations at a very, very high pace. And theoretically, the concept is you're giving something out there some audible clay to work with. And if you're lucky enough, you might actually start to get whole words or whole phrases that span over the course of many radio stations. And that is technically not possible. There can be some bleed over from time to time, but not at the rates that we do. So we decided to do an Estes session and see if we can, connect with something there. Anytime I do an Estes session, I just kind of like go blank. I'm 1 inch away from just completely falling asleep. I just kind of go into a trance. And apparently, I just the line of questioning was, it seems awfully quiet here tonight. Why don't you come out and connect with us? Because it was very quiet up until that point. And apparently, I just started saying, just wait an hour, just wait an hour. I just kept repeating that. As I was doing this, I ended up getting kind of shaken out of my trance because I started to feel what felt like fingertips running through the back of my hair. And then I felt like another hand start to pull my beanie down further over my eyes. Even though I had a blindfold on, it felt like somebody was just pulling it straight down. At the same time, fingers are running through my hair. And whenever I kind of snap out of it and I literally start shivering on the table, like this was freaking me out. The fingers that were running up my scalp stopped. And then I felt fingers release, except for 3 of them that stayed in the same position and they just pressed in a little bit. Not enough to hurt, but enough for me to notice that it felt like 3 fingers were pressing on to my scalp. This is going to matter later. So that kind of freaked me out. And at the same time, Walker, who is a very important part of my core team, he was over sitting in a chair. And this is the guy that I was telling you about who's like a human barometer. So if weird stuff is going on, he starts to get nauseous, gets vertigo, starts shivering. It was happening to him. And at the same time that I was getting fingers run through my hair, so was he. And I didn't find out about that until later. So that kind of shook us, and everybody's just like, okay, that was stupid intense. Let's just go back to the break room. Let's grab some snacks. Let's calm down. Let's mellow out. By that point, my adrenaline was pumped. So I'm like, I can't sit and eat right now. I got to go for a walk. And so I just decided to walk out into the second floor hallway and sit down and just catch my breath and just kind of relax for a few and just collect my thoughts and just sit with the building. And after about 10 minutes, I'm sitting here staring down this hallway. And these hallways are massive. If you've never seen a picture of this place, we're talking like almost a half-mile long hallway. I would say about 900 feet, 800 feet from me, I start to see something weird move in the shadows. And I'm sitting here watching it for a bit. And my first thought is like, moonlight casting shadows from the trees. It's somewhat windy. That's all it is. Get out of your head, man. And then I see something move into a doorway, like retreat. And then a few seconds later, I see something pop out of a doorway closer to me. And this time the moonlight kind of hits it. And what I saw was part of a bald head and an elbow sticking out of the shadows. Um, at that point, I am not I am not too proud to say this. I actually peed a little. Um, because it was not natural. It was enough to, like, my heart started going, and I cold sweats, and I actually like backed up a little bit, and then it retreats back into the doorway, and then it pops back up again, a doorway closer to me, this time on the other side of the hallway. And then at that point, I totally lose it, and I Scooby Doo it the hell out of there. I go straight back to the break room, and I go straight to my mentor, Jill, like the one who has kind of held my hand through learning about all of this stuff. I walk in there and I almost have tears in my eyes, and she's like, "What happened?" I'm like, "I got what I asked for, and I really regret it." And she said, "What happened?" I said, "I saw the creeper," and she said, "Let's go," and I'm like, "No." No, 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 no. They calm me down. I'm like, okay, strength in numbers, fine. All right. So the whole crew comes out there, right? And at that point, like, I even walk out to the balcony to the one guy who kind of monitors the place while you're doing an investigation there. He's out there having a smoke, and I walk out and I'm like, "Hey, buddy, we're having creeper action on the second floor." And he looks at me as like, "That's impossible. He only stays on he's only on the fourth, maybe the fifth sometimes." And I'm like, "You want to come here?" So he gets in. At this point, we now have 10 people plus one. So 11 total if you count our tour guide. Standing in this hallway, and everybody just kind of anchors themselves down. And I just said, like, let your eyes relax and just try to look past, like, look as far into the hallway as you possibly can. And then after a few minutes, I start hearing people go like, "Holy crap!" and like, "What is that?" And there it was. Now I said that I wanted to come back to this particular one because it kind of ties into what I was talking about on the last time I was on the show, and that is, like, consciousness is key with everything, right? So 10 or 11 people witness this, but it wasn't until we did the review after the investigation was over that I realized that while we all experienced something, not all of us experienced it the same way. Only 3 other people saw what I was seeing, which was a legitimate humanoid that was crawling up the wall and onto the ceiling, fading into the shadows, and then popping into a doorway here and there, and just kept moving around. Only 3 other people plus me saw that. 2 other people witnessed it as a black amorphous shadow that they described moved like what happens when you put ink in water, the way that it just kind of flows, you know? 2 other people referenced it as orbs or tiny pinpricks of light that were surrounded by shadow. Another one referenced it to it being kind of like the cloaking device from The Predator, if you've ever seen any of those movies.
Of course.
And then the last one was Walker, who saw nothing, but when he was in the hallway with us, he was just doubled over in pain and just groaning. And the closer that it got, the more sick he got. Um, we sat there staring at this thing for almost an hour, and it kept its distance. And eventually, me and Todd, who went with me to the Uinta trip, Todd was on this investigation as well, and he and I were like, "Do you want to walk forward?" I'm like, "Only if you're with me." "Yeah, let's do it." So we started advancing forward and trying to get closer to it, and it keeps retreating. The closer that we get, the further away it goes. And eventually it gets to the point where Jill kind of graciously broke the trance of this, and she was like, "It's still going to be here. Let's let's move on. Let's do something else." And I think I needed that, because otherwise I would have just been sitting in that hallway staring into these hollow things that should be eyes pretty much for the rest of the evening. So we break the trance, we go on about, and we start interacting with weird stuff in the children's ward and in the hallways. Um, but I keep getting this sneaky sensation that it's not over. So after about an hour and a half of us leaving the hallway, I start to slow down from the rest of the group a little bit. Keeping them within my line of sight, but giving myself a little room to breathe. And then I started looking over my shoulder, and that thing was following me for the rest of the night for like 4 hours straight. This thing was always about 60 to 70 feet behind me. And eventually it started to bug me so much. I reached out, so Todd is our skeptic of the group. He's a healthy skeptic. He has seen a lot of stuff, but he still, he's just of the school of thought of like, yeah, it happened, but I still don't know. He's not necessarily definitively set into a belief structure on all this stuff, but I asked him to go on a walk with me away from the rest of the group, and Lisa, his partner, joined us as well. And Creeper starts popping back up again, and then I do probably one of the most stupid things that I've ever done in my life. I slowly, like I asked them to stay back, but I slowly approach this thing step by step. And when I get about, and it doesn't back away. Like I asked them to stay away, just like let me approach, just stay there for a minute. So I started to approach it and I got to about 20 feet away. And this thing is crouched down in a doorway with its, like, I can see part of its head and its elbows sticking out. And I can tell it's staring right at me. I get down on all fours and I start to mimic its movement. And then we start moving closer to one another. And there are witnesses for this. Like I can bring them on for this. If you don't believe me, I've said it wasn't just me that was there. So there are other people who witness this. But we got close. Like I don't know, maybe 10, 12 feet away. And I just mirrored everything that this thing was doing, and it got a little closer to me. And it was around that time that Lisa and Todd started saying, like, "Are you seeing this?" And I'm like, "Seeing what?" Because I have my eyes fixed on this thing. And they said, "I think you might want to break your eyes away and look up for a second." And so I turn my head just ever so slightly, and further down in the hallway, we're seeing orbs. And I'm not talking about like big, bright balls of light or anything like super dramatic like that. This is really, really subtle. And the best way that I can describe it, it's almost like somebody had a laser pen that the battery was dying and they were just briefly streaking back and forth, like boom, boom, boom. So you get a pinpoint of light and kind of like a sparkle trail behind it, right? And they were all of different colors. And I'm looking at this happen, and then I look back at where the creeper was, and it's gone. And so Lisa and Todd approach me, and I stand up. And as we're sitting here looking at this stuff, Lisa just walks away. Todd sticks with me for a minute. They start, God, this sounds so corny when I say it, but I really just because this is straight out of like Insidious or something like this. But this happened. These these little pinpricks of light are bouncing around of all different colors: green, violet, yellow, red, blue. And then it goes back to red. And then it goes back to red. And then there's another red. And then all of a sudden, they stop moving as much. And they start to solidify. And two of them pair right next to each other. And Shannon, I kid you not, I literally witnessed the shadows from the ceiling poured down to the floor like it was filling a vase that was shaped like a person.
Mm.
And the next thing that I know, I'm staring at a 7 foot tall shadow entity with red eyes staring right at me. And then two more appear on the side of it. It was at that point that like I didn't even say anything to Todd. I just turned around, I grabbed him like we're out. We left because that did not That felt scary. The the creeper, I feel a sort of kinship to it, and I'll explain why here in a bit. But whatever the hell that was staring at me with red eyes, like that's a hard nope. I've seen a lot of stuff, and I have, but that was one of the first times that I wasn't driven by curiosity. I was driven by survival and fear. Get the hell out of there right now. Ugh.
So is the thought then that you were I suppose it's part maybe taunting, part trying to understand, part trying to get closer, right? Because that's what you do. You want to know answers the question. So, first of all, holy crap that you did that. I'm sure looking back, you're like, holy crap that I did that. Is it thinking then that these shadows that formed with the red eyes were some kind of wards that were saying, hey, this isn't part of what we do here. Like, you're not allowed to creep up on the creeper. What's going on here?
No, 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 no. I'm actually, I love that you bring that up. And I'll give a deeper overview as I wrap this story up because there's still some other pieces to this. But I, I think I think I know where the creeper came from. The shadow entities that are there, what I, in my best estimation, because that's all we can do. There's no way to, we don't know how to collect data for this stuff yet, right? And then I try to keep a scientific mind, even though this crap keeps happening to me. No clue how to, no clue how to log data for this. Um, Whatever the shadow entities were, I would say are probably representations of the darker side of the Woodhaven years. They felt menacing, and they felt like it felt like if I would have gone further down that hallway, I would have had something come back with me that was worse than what came back from Waverly with me. So, um, but the creeper, while it was terrifying when I first saw it, by the end of this experience, I legitimately felt a kind of kinship to it, and that'll make sense at the end of this. So after all this goes down, we go and regroup with the rest of the team, and we pretty much spend the rest of the evening together. Like we do our trips down to the death tunnel, we do our wanderings and things like that. Um, Actually, the last couple of hours were theoretically, like, theoretically full of the spirits of kids because we spent a lot of time up on the fifth floor, which was where the nursery and then the nurses' stations were. And there was a very playful sense there. Like we sat in a circle and we actually had something do duck, duck, goose on us. It was weird. Bunch of us sitting in a circle and everybody was feeling head taps all the way around. But every time we got to Walker, it's like somebody slapped him.
Oh my gosh, poor Walker.
I know. No, the guy is an antenna. And I feel so. Every time we go out on an investigation, I just look at him before it starts and I say, "I'm sorry," but he just goes like, "I signed up for this. Like, what? You're good, man. I'm doing this to myself." So Waverly comes to a close, and we end up departing. But I felt forever changed after that. I saw something. I saw something really messed up. I saw a lot of things that were really, really messed up. And normally I can handle that pretty good, but for some reason, because of its direct interaction with me, and especially the creeper following me around, kind of weirded me out. So, and this is no joke, 2 weeks after I get back, I go in to the doctor because I have some strange spots on my scalp. And they've been there for a while, but I hadn't been feeling too good, and my vision started to get blurry and stuff like that. Come to find out, I had stage 3 skin cancer on, note it, 3 spots on my scalp, the exact same spots that those fingers
What?
stayed on. Yeah. Um, and they were dangerously close to actually like burrowing through the skull, and yeah, this could have gotten really, really bad. So The heartwarming part about this is that in spite of how utterly terrifying these experiences were and how much it shook my core, when I look back at it now, I feel like they were trying to warn me because I might not have gone if not for the pain that I was feeling on those 3 spots in my scalp that followed after I left Waverly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Holy smokes, I was not expecting that.
Yeah, like I said, there's a lot I play close to the chest, but this stuff has interacted with me in really, really intense ways, and like I barely touch on that on my own podcast. It's just it's a lot to take in, you know.
Well, and it's a lot to go through. I mean, I can't imagine getting that news and then you're like trying to put it together. You're like, oh my God, like, that's that's where
Yeah,
it was touching me. I this is nuts.
yeah, no, it's utterly terrifying yet also like hopeful and heartwarming. There's a lot of emotions rolled into that one, you know.
Well, thank you for sharing that, John. Holy smokes. Now, have others from Waverly Hills, have you ever heard of a story similar to that, but particular to your, your health and things like that?
No, 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 I haven't.
Wow.
But if anybody out there has anything similar like that, please reach out to me because I mean, what if the phenomenon that's going on there is actually trying to be helpful rather than scary?
Right.
You know, just
They're just misunderstood.
because that's really what I feel. What I now feel I understand why the creeper was following me is because death was close behind me, and
Mm.
it wasn't a malevolent thing. It was just kind of, um, hey buddy, you might want to go get checked out. I don't feel any fear towards the creeper at this point. As a matter of fact, I want to go back and thank him, and I want to thank whatever was in the morgue that touched me. But whatever the hell those shadows were, no, 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 that's not good. But I do have a theory on where the creeper actually originated from. Um, do you want to hear a good folk tale?
Oh, heck yeah.
All right. So remember when I said that Woodhaven was a dumping ground for undesirables of all kinds, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in the late 60s, um, a 11-year-old boy was dropped off there because his father thought he was a little too weak, if you'll catch my drift. Um, Basically, like, thought his son was gay, didn't want to do anything about it. So just throw
Mm-hmm.
him into the asylum, right? Um, this kid apparently is incredibly gifted, and there are written documents from nurses and doctors describing the day that he showed up. And when he stepped out of the car, a lot of animals from the surrounding forest like came up to the front of the clearing and just stared. Like, yeah, it's real weird fairy type of stuff. And this incredibly gifted kid, unfortunately, ends up being subjected to the horrid abuse from both patients and doctors alike, and is one of the first children to be put under the horrid practice of electroshock treatment. The first time that it happens, the entire the first time that he gets the treatment, apparently everything goes nuts. Cabinets start flying open, windows break, instruments start flying around the room. Um, they gave him one shock on that first treatment. They're like, "Cool, all right, that was enough. We're not doing that again." But the doctor who designed it was, consistent, like, "All right, insistent that we got to do it again." They do it a second time, and this is again in documents somewhere in the Reen Institute. And if I can, man, if I can get my hands into those records, this would be great. But apparently, there's a nurse who witnessed, like, when this kid goes under his second electroshock treatment. Before he even walks in the room, this nurse sees an impish shadow-like figure crouched on all fours, crawling right behind this kid. And then, as soon as they shock him, the thing pops up in the room, and then from then on has been seen. Um, Also followed the kid when he was kicked out of Waverly and sent to oh God, it's a place in West Virginia. I can't remember that. Yeah, sorry, I'm drawing a blank, but
That's
it's a
okay.
similar institution in West Virginia. They send him there. This shadow thing shows up as well there. They kick him out after 48 hours. His uncle comes and picks him up to take him back to Kentucky. And as they're crossing through West Virginia into Ohio, they come across Silver Bridge. And this kid starts freaking out and crying and screaming and saying, "You didn't tell me we were going to go through Point Pleasant. Pull over, stop, 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 stop." Kid starts freaking out, vomiting. It's a scene. 4 hours later, the Silver Bridge collapsed.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Look, there's a lot of details to this thing in particular that I am happy to discuss off air, but the thing is, this guy is still alive and I intend to protect him.
Yeah.
I will give you the full story off of here, but I believe that this individual is where the creeper came from, and it's like a trauma manifestation or trauma tulpa egregore, something like that. Either that or it's part of his psyche that managed to shatter off and manifest itself in some way. But yeah, that rabbit hole goes really, really deep. It Waverly gets tied to a lot of things.
And you don't have to answer this, of course. But the first thing that pops into my head is, does this grown man now, I'm assuming, does he know that his creeper is still running around Waverly Hills?
I think so. Yeah.
Has he ever gone there in person?
I am going to just suggest that we stop that line of question because this person needs to have
No
peace
problem.
with what is left of his life. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Understandable.
We'll talk about that off air.
Okay.
But no, it's so yeah, that's the Waverly shtick. Like we went in there. I went in there with something in mind, and I got it, and turned out that it was letting me know that, hey, you're pretty close to dying, buddy. Like, that's a lot. That's a lot.
Last line of questioning, and if this is too far, of course, just let me know and I'll get off this part of the creeper. But is it your thought that the creeper was more like a monkey on his back, or was it a protector for him?
I think protector. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, no, I really do because again, like when I first saw it, I was struck with fear and terror because I'd never seen anything like this before. But by the end of it, I wasn't afraid of it. I was just as curious about it as it was about me. And then after what happened when I got back and I got my checkup, I'm like, oh man, I he was a harbinger of warning to me, if anything, you know?
That does track then, doesn't it? Because,
Yeah.
I mean, look how
I
he
am,
was created out of trauma and fear. And even though you didn't know any of that was going on, it could sense that on you.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
problem. And that is so interesting. Do you wonder
Yeah,
what... I'm sorry, go ahead, John.
No, I really want to go back and try to interact with it again. And I honestly say thank you to that place because if it wasn't for that experience, I would have just let it go and who knows where I would have been. You know?
Do you think if you redid these same movements and you crouched down and you could tell the black shadow figures to, F off or whatever, do you think that you could go right up to the creeper? Would you do that? Would you go right up to it as close as you could? Like, is that the goal?
I would give it a hug if I was able to be honest. But I don't think it would ever allow anyone to get that close.
But of course, the question is, since you, just real quick before I forget this, since you know now that you had a problem and, you get the cancer, you're taking care of it, do you think now it would just go back to, oh, you're just part of the normal crowd that comes through here?
No, because I've told you before, like I'm naturally tuned into this stuff, whether or not I want to be. It's only been in the last few years that I've really opened myself and let it happen.
Mm-hmm.
So if I show back up at Waverly, I guarantee you something will happen. And I'm not I don't I'm not banking that like, hey, I will definitely see the creeper again. But if I do, yeah, you better believe it. I'm gonna try to approach it, and I'm gonna try to get closer because that was a life changing experience for me,
Well, and
and
also,
I'm no longer afraid of it.
well, I would say that's pretty huge, especially since, and once you started to talk about the creeper, I'm like, I do recall at least in passing someone being like, oh, the creeper at Waverly Hills, Um, but just to reiterate the fact that this was on level 2, and somebody that is very obviously in tune with the place and knows what's doing is like, no, 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 no. He's only seen on 4 or 5 or it, whatever. Why in the actual hell is it on level 2? You're seeing things. You're like,
Oh, I'm
come on, let's
I'm
go.
I'm so glad you brought that up because that's a funny little anecdote about all this that I forgot to mention. So the our tour guide, who was also named John, and John, if you're listening, oh man, this was so good. He comes and joins us as we're watching this thing in the hallway on the second floor. And he walks out in front of us, and I love this. He crouches down onto his knees like he's bending down to pet a dog, and he just goes, "What are you doing down here, buddy? What are you doing? You belong up there. What are you doing down here?" And I'm just sitting here watching this guy going like, "Are you okay? All right. We're gonna roll with this. This is fine. This is totally fine." That threw me for a loop though. Like he just walks out right in front of him and be like, "Hey, buddy, shouldn't go back on 4?"
So maybe, I mean, of course, he's been there a lot. He's a tour guide. He sounds like he'd be fun to talk to. But do you think he has kind of the same thought that you do, the same feeling of affection and just more this warmth towards the creeper? Or is he just trying to avoid any kind of strangeness because that it being on 2 was so far out of the norm for it? He was maybe worried. I don't know.
No, apparently everybody who works there, like the people who run the security and all that stuff, they've all become so accustomed to the phenomena that nothing really throws
Right.
them
Right.
anymore, which is like mind numbing to me. Like it's like, if you experience it that much, it's become mundane. Jesus, man. I mean, I do too, but come on,
He's
you're at
calling it
Waverly.
buddy. I freaking love that. Hey, buddy.
Right. Look, I'm straight up. If I were to win the lottery this weekend, the first thing that I would do is rent out Waverly for 4 solid months. And
Oh,
just I would
wow.
straight up, I would just live there, document everything, bring all the right people in to try to communicate with this stuff because it wants to talk, whether it's the creeper or the kids or there's a lot of different spirits there. Um the most heartwarming thing we got, the first interaction that we got, Walker and I were kind of doing a pan walk around through the third floor. We both walk into a room thinking it's like another hallway or a larger room, but it turns out to be a closet. And then we turn around, and as soon as we do, there's a little plastic toy truck sitting right in front of us. And I'm like, that wasn't there when we walked into this room, was it? No. Okay. Can you play the camera back? And sure enough, you see us walk through. There's no toy truck. We turn around, there's a toy truck. And that felt like an invitation to play.
Now, do you feel like that's an apport, or are there, in fact, on different, like you said, there's certain levels where nurse is stationed and the younger people would be, or do you think that was just moved from another location? It was
No,
already
no, it's
physical.
definitely apportation
Wow.
because we witnessed it a couple of more times throughout the course of the night. There was
Oh,
one
that's cool.
ball that kept moving through 2 floors. Um, yeah, like it's that stuff is nuts. And the thing that drives me bananas about it is I never get to see it happen. It just shows up behind your back. And this is the thing that because I hear stories about people like, yeah, the thing just manifests in the middle of the air and then drops to the floor. We never got any of that. It's stuff that we pass this one specific blue ball and then we go up 1 floor and then that blue ball is in the exact same spot on the floor right above it. And then we send somebody else to go down and like, yep, ball's gone. That's the same one. Um, Yeah, that place likes to play a lot. There's a lot of different entities and a lot of different energies in there, but I'm incredibly grateful for that experience because it essentially saved my life, and I really want to go back and pay my respects to them.
That is a really cool story, John, I have to say. Even though it was laced with the terrifying aspects, I'm sure, that is a very, very cool, powerful personal story. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Oh,
Last
absolutely.
question about everything that you just shared. So you said that three of you guys saw the creeper as the creeper is. Another couple saw this anomalous black blob, amorphous shape.
Mhm.
Another person maybe saw a predator type. Have you thought about what are the similarities between like you three or these two over here that saw the blood? Have you thought about that? Is that just a random thing, or is there a connection between like you three that saw the creeper as he truly normally is?
There might be, and believe me, I have written and audio testimonies from everybody about this, and I am thinking about that, but I don't have a response right now.
Mm,
But it
right.
definitely leans into, like I said last time, consciousness is key. Like you have a phenomena that presents itself to a group of people, but not everybody perceives it or experiences it the same
Mm-hmm.
way. I mean, that's the stuff that fascinates me, right?
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
I
So
agree, and I love that you're already like, oh, I've already gone down that rabbit hole because there's something that lies right there that we're just not understanding that could be a huge piece of this puzzle. I don't know if I'll ever get there, but it's amazing to talk about and fun to hear these different stories because we've heard that time and again. You've got
I
two people in a car. One sees a 4 foot tall owl, and the other's like, that's a damn alien. What are you talking about?
over right. Yeah. Exactly. Well, Shannon, I think the best way to progress the conversation is to acknowledge, but then admit that we don't know. And that's the thing. Everybody wants to be an expert. But if we can all just get to the point that we agree that the phenomena is real, then we can collectively figure out how to work through it together.
Right.
That's where I'm at because I mean, I don't have to prove anything to anyone at this point. Um, that's all on them. But those of us who do actually believe in this and want to get to the bottom of it without getting too far into the woo woo, you got to keep all of this balanced. For me, I'm 50-50, scientist state of mind and full blown believer. But I got to reconcile that and find a healthy balance.
And therein lies the conundrum and of course the fun. I mean, it's just fun to go out and do this stuff, and it is fun to be scared sometimes, and then it is incredible though what happened to you is absolutely incredible, and it shows that there is a completely different side to things that you're just like, oh, let me just go get some EVPs and have the shit scared out of me. There's so much more to it than that.
Yeah, look, I'm telling you and everybody listening right now, if you really want to have these experiences, get your noses out of the equipment, get your eyes off of the screens. You need to be there in the moment, and you're going to get what you asked for. If the whole purpose is for you to get evidence, then you're not going to get it. It's not going to give you evidence. It's supposed to be giving you an experience, and you should be focusing on that. That's my humble opinion, at least.
Well, John, thank you for sharing all that. That was incredible. I was not
Yeah.
expecting the culmination there. That was really a cool story. So, tell me everything you know about the land of the moon-eyed people in Fort Mountain State Park and what happened to you there.
Oh God, this is gonna be a fun one. Okay, so the Moon-eyed people. Man, I wish Walker was here for this because this is right up his alley. But he was the one who put this into my wheelhouse. Fort Mountain State Park in Georgia used to be home to a variety of Native Americans, and they had stories of a strange tribe of pale white people with clear blue moon-like eyes, white hair, who lived in like underground, and they would come out like troglodytes at night and forage and things like that. And essentially, they became known as the Moon-eyed People. There's a lot of fun history holes to dive into because it also connects to some theoretical Scandinavian explorers and things like that. There might be some reason to believe that if these things were real, they might have been previous settlers of the Viking generation and things like that. And there is a sister site to Fort Mountain in Indiana, Devil's Backbone, I believe. And basically, the Fort Mountain State Park has this series of strange stone stackings. They're like pathways, walls, strange things like that. And nobody really knows where they came from, but they seem to be attributed to the Moon Eyed people. So this is something that has always fascinated Walker, and he was like, "Hey, I want to pick the next one." I'm like, "Okay, where are we going?" Fort Mountain, Georgia. I'm like, "Okay, let's go." So we go out there, we do our camping bit, and by the way, like camping paranormal investigations, that's the best. I like get out into the woods, folks. We need more of it. Um, so we get there, we set up camp, and then we decide on the first thing in the morning on the second day. It's like, all right, let's make the hike up to the quote unquote walls. So we start hiking up, and about midway up the hill, like I start to get a little woozy, and I wasn't attributing to this to like altitude issues or like me being out of shape or anything. This felt like this. I felt slightly drunk, a little bit, just out of the blue. And then we keep pushing forward, and then we finally get to the clearing where all of these stone stackings and these structures are. And I don't know how else to explain it, Shannon. The second that we put our feet into this clearing, it felt like we all got dosed with psilocybin mushrooms. Um, every single one of us just kind of had this whole woo, oh, oh, this is fun, isn't it, guys? Yeah, yeah. And everybody just stopped talking and started like wandering around. Like, I walked over to a stack of rocks and just started building a tower of rocks for no reason whatsoever. And crew started walking. Hey, what are you doing? I don't know. Just stacking rocks. I felt compelled to do it. The light looked different there. Things looked a hint of violet over everything. I don't know. It was really weird, but it was one of those occasions that makes me wonder if, as much as there could be a correlation of consciousness and us to the phenomena itself, are there geographical places where the phenomena is more present? And this definitely felt like one of those places. Felt a lot like what I was feeling out at Brown Mountain when we saw the Brown Mountain lights too. Um, old things from the earth. But that place was it was wild. We spent almost 3.5, 4 hours up in this area, and I think I remember maybe 20 minutes of it. And the same can be said for most of the team too.
Was there any? I don't. I don't know how to really say because you guys were talking to each other at some point, at least two of you, and even though there wasn't much conversation, was there? Did it seem like there was less sound in that area? Like things were muted somehow?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, now that you mention it, I can't remember hearing any sounds other than the rustling of leaves when the wind came through. No birds, nothing crawling around. Yeah, it was weird.
And you guys were bathed in this violet light for most of those 4 hours. Do you? Oh, of course you wouldn't remember because you said you remember like 20 minutes of it.
Yeah, like I mean, I remember being there. I remember stacking the rocks. I remember we did walk up to the lighthouse. There's a lighthouse that was built by settlers long after these stone structures were built. And then I remember bits and pieces of walking the entire trail, but it's all very disjointed, you know. And the Walker and I were just talking about this the other night about how like a true dissociation was the feeling that we got from that experience. Nothing bad, but it's just weird, and that they're missing pieces. And I'm sure if we all actually sat down together, we could probably piece together the entire 4 hours. I'm just saying that I don't remember all of it. It's weird.
There was an episode a long time ago called "The Muted Places," I love this episode. And he came on, and he alone had stepped into a similar situation, not exactly like you described, but he was within, rock throwing distance of two other people that when he was in this area, they couldn't hear him and they couldn't see him. And he was like in charge of these people. So it's like one of those things where they weren't screwing with him. He was the boss, they wouldn't do that.
Oh, yeah.
So the second you started to say all this, I'm like, oh my gosh, that reminds me of what he went through.
That happened to us actually at Waverly and also at Sally House too.
Really?
Yeah. Very, very specific bubbles, like to the point that team member was 10 feet away and screaming and nobody heard him. And then they come downstairs and like, did you not hear me? No, we didn't hear nothing, buddy.
Holy crap. See, that would get kind of scary to be that person. Now, at Waverly, is that a certain area that it tends to do that? Or is this a moving kind of a portal, whatever you want to call it, such bubble?
I think whatever's going on at Waverly, however many things are going on at Waverly, it gets around. I don't think, I don't know, the morgue might be a hot spot just based on what happened with us, but I mean that's one account, so don't take that to the bank. But no, whatever's going on at Waverly seems to be more fluid and more able to travel.
Do you
Yeah.
recall what the rock stack that you built looked like? You think there
Yeah, I'll
was
send
anything? Oh,
send you a
really?
picture. Yeah.
So do you think there's some significance to the shape of it, or how many rocks or whatever?
I have no clue. All I know is that I felt very much at peace when I was doing it. And when I finally got done, I was like, yes, you're done. That's good. And I felt
Wow.
good about it. And I just walked off. And I'm not, it was, very uncharacteristic of me to do something like that. Yeah, that's what everybody on the team is like, what the hell are you doing? I'm like, I don't know.
So right now, without comparing notes with anybody else that was there, you don't really recall much else consciously, of course, but the time that you were building this rock stack. Like, you don't recall going over to a tree or sitting on the ground or anything else, really.
I remember, like I said, I remember tidbits, like little snippets throughout the entire 4 hours that we were up there. But it plays like a bad edit.
Mm-hmm.
Like I remember doing the rocks. I remember taking the picture of the rocks. I remember wondering, why am I messing with rocks? Next thing I remember, we were all leaning against the sign and taking a picture. Next thing I remember, we were all up at the lighthouse and kind of scoping that out. Next thing I remember, we were like halfway through the trail. And then the next thing I remember, I was sitting on a rock that was shaped like a crescent moon, and somebody was taking a picture of me. And it just feels, it, man, it doesn't feel like missing time. It feels like true dissociation. Like I completely checked out. And I know that all the pieces are there. I don't want to refer to this. I don't feel like this is a missing time scenario. I think this is more of a screwing with our perception of time. Is maybe that's what was going on up there. I don't know. But I want to go back. It's an interesting spot. It would be interesting to go with more people, and especially with more evolved state of mind, because I'm not the same person that I was when I started this journey and when we did all this.
I'm almost a little surprised that any of the photos came out.
Yeah. Oh, but I should reach out to Alejandro and see if we can get the Polaroids from him, because he did get some anomalies. Like, he was taking
Oh.
pictures while he was up there, and he caught some weird stuff. So I'll reach out to him and see if we can get our hands on that. Yeah.
Have you guys ever considered, or I don't even know if you'd be allowed to, but can you sleep there? Can you camp there?
There are campsites nearby. I don't think you're legally allowed to camp on that particular property, but I'm pretty sure that nobody would care. We
Right.
just wouldn't be. We would have to forego a fire.
Right.
Yeah.
As long as you're up there not doing a bunch of crazy stuff, no one would even know.
I don't really think they'd care, and I'm so long as it's not in the dead of winter, I'm fine with getting away with no fire.
Right, right.
Yeah, I would honestly. I would really like to. That would be interesting.
So the Moon-Eyed
I
people, they I mean, are they good? Are they bad? What do they do? What are what's their MO?
They're they were feared by other tribes, but there was no actual like aggression or interaction. They were just weird and creepy, and so local tribes didn't like them, and they mostly kept to themselves. They would pop up every once in a while to go look for supplies, and they'd crawl back in to their little holes. Weird stuff. It's like the Morlocks.
Yeah, anything or anybody that lives under the ground, like caves, freak me the hell out. Ain't doing it. I
mean, the way
much.
they were described to me, I just expected like a whole family of bearded golems.
Right. Yeah. See, but how do you know they didn't come out and say hi while you guys were all just in Happy Land, and you don't recall most of that 4 hours, so I don't know.
Well, if they were real, I would think that they're probably long gone by now, or I don't know, maybe have actually devolved into Hadels from The Descent. Who knows?
That's my favorite book on the whole planet.
Wait, The Descent?
Yes, that's my favorite book. I've read it probably 5 times over the course of
Jeff Long, right?
Jeff Long, yes.
Oh my! All right, we're having another conversation when this is over because nobody knows about that book, and it makes me so happy when I come across somebody who has read it.
And don't get me wrong, the movie is great, but not a lot of people know that the director or writer, screenplay writer, whatever,
totally
of that movie, but they claim that they didn't, and I'm like, bull crap. That is a whole bunch of bull. There's no possible way. And the movie's fine. Don't get me wrong, but the book is insane and just that's my favorite book. I mean, I love Stephen King. I'm still working through his entire library, but Jeff Long's The Descent is something everyone listening
Did you read deeper?
Of course, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Supposedly, we're finally going to get that third book in the next year.
No.
Yeah. He's been working on it forever.
Oh.
Like, he promised it was going to be a trilogy, and the rumor mill is turning, and apparently he's getting close.
I hope so.
I
mean, I'm not going to spoil it, but
end.
Yeah, no, parts of Deeper, you're just like, what did I just read? No. I'm not going to spoil it for anybody, but in fact, Shanna, one of my buddies, she's been on the show and we talk a lot. I got her to read it and she's like, that book was insane. I'm like, yes, it is. And it's amazing. I mean, it just gets the hooks in within the first 2 pages and you're like, holy, this is one of the creepiest things I've ever even put into my mind.
The opening scene with Ike, and then when you find him later, it's just like,
my God,
okay,
bro.
All right. Can we please nerd out just for a few minutes after we stop recording?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Okay, so about this whole situation there, something that's pretty fascinating that's come up a lot of times, even on my own show, is strange things that go on around boulders, around big, rock fields, boulder fields, things like that. I guess it's no different than when you talk about, with the quartz around Skinwalker Ranch or whatever's out there, lime or whatever the hell it is, granite, things like that with imprints in it. And it's just pretty fascinating that not only were you guys there knowing that there's these boulders and walls, but then you end up building this damn rock stack.
Yeah, like for no reason whatsoever. I'm not that type of guy.
Has to be a reason, though. That's where my brain is like, what? I can't wait to see this rock stack and maybe... and I always like, I like to say, if people mention pictures and sending me pictures, I always like to say, while people are listening to the show, are some of these going to be meant for other people to see, or is this just for me? So that way people aren't emailing me, go, where's the pictures? And, they weren't ever meant for their eyeballs.
Oh, no, anything that we discuss on here, I'll it's open for everybody to see. And, if it's not, then and I'm sharing it with you directly, you will know about that off the feed.
Excellent. Yeah, I just like to put that out there. IntoTheFrayRadio.com. Just go to this episode. It is in the show notes. It is not hard to find. Well, John, please let everyone know where to find you. And, of course, Ex V Planis is coming back, right? The podcast.
Oh, yeah, no, we're already back at it. We dropped 2 episodes in the last week. I got another one coming out tonight with a collaboration with some of our Small Town Monsters friends. And then, oh, God, what is it? Next week, I think next week we're going to have a guest with somebody who's trying to bring parapsychology back into academics at a college in Idaho. That's going to be a really interesting
Oh.
conversation. And and then after that, for the rest of this season, which we always close out on winter solstice, we do our Ex V Planis holiday party that day, and then we shut it down until February. The rest of this season is going to be focused on UAP disclosure and where we're at with that and where we're going, because I think it's time we start getting the information out.
And remind everybody, because isn't there a website, and then where you can? I mean, of course, most people know the podcatchers, but it's good to say, where you can find everything.
Yeah, absolutely. You can go to xvplanis.com, and it has your basic rundown of our links. Follow us on Instagram, Blue Sky in particular. That's going to be our new spot, especially for all things UFO related. All social media as Ex V Planis. You can find us on there. And again, a sincere thank you for the last visit, and also a sincere thank you to all of your listeners who reached out to me. Again, if anybody sees anything in that clip art that's quote unquote clip art that's worth mentioning, please forward it on. And if anybody else has any similar experiences, I think I'd really like to talk to the guy that you spoke to about mute places. That stands out.
Yes, that one always has for me. And there's been snippets of things over the years that's been similar, but yours is probably maybe one of the closest ones. So that's why I specifically asked, do you remember what it sounded like in that spot? And like I said, all of you were in that place, so it's not like any of you recall screaming for another and they didn't hear you, anything like that. So there isn't that similarity.
Not in that location.
Right.
Not in that place.
Unless you just don't remember. But pretty fascinating stuff, really.
There is that. Yeah. Well, yeah, Shannon, thank you again so much for having me. It's always a blast to hang out and talk weird with you.
If you're new here, I hope you're enjoying it enough to head to your podcatcher of choice to rate and review the show. This helps it aggregate across the listening platforms, which will turn into more people willing to come on and share their encounters. If you've been listening for years, I'd ask that you please do the same. Home base for Into the Fray is intothefrayradio.com. There you will find all episodes, blog posts, and get bonus content info. Speaking of that bonus content, on top of the free weekly show, I also produce bonus content for Patreon and Apple Podcasts Premium. On either platform, you get all bonus audio episodes and early releases, each one ad-free, of course. Full disclosure, though, Patreon has a bit more in the way of perks because of their interface. Over there, you will get video versions of patron-only chats, the private Discord channel, and merch at certain pledge levels. So head to patreon.com/intothefray or your Apple Podcatcher app to sign up for bonus content today. You can find me on the big 3 social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The Linktree link in each of my bios will take you to all the places you want to venture regarding ITF, including Small Town Monsters documentaries, various ways to listen to the show, Beyond the Fray books, contact info for me, and more. And lastly, and really honestly most importantly, if you'd like to share your encounter or encounters on Into the Fray, the best way to get in touch is by emailing me at shannon@intothefrayradio.com.